Support for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
People love a winner. More pointedly, people love a winner from their own neighborhood. It makes us feel like we can share in their accomplishments to some degree. Welcome to our weekly dialogue and the most widely watched source of Carolina business and public policy. I'm Chris William, and on this special Carolina Business Review, our executive profile series, a hometown boy that makes very good. Bob McNair grew up in the Tar Heel foothills community of Forest City, North Carolina, and went on to master the 1990s cogeneration business into literally a fortune, which he and his group have since redeployed profits to ownership of the NFL expansion team, the Houston Texans, as well as private equity investments, real estate, and philanthropy. So from humble beginnings to the top of his game, we will chat with Bob McNair, and we start in just a moment.
Major funding also by Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. And by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. On this edition of Carolina Business Review, an executive profile featuring Bob McNair, owner of the Houston Texans. And now, from the campus of Isothermal Community College, here's Chris William.
Welcome, and one of the great things about being in the Carolinas is the familial idea that we have around being friends and relations in North and South Carolina. And on this program is a favored son of not just Rutherford County in North Carolina, but a favored son of the Palmetto State as well. Bob McNair, welcome home, and welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Bob, there's so many things we want to talk about. If someone were to look you up online and saw your resume and your CV, if you will, your interests are varied. You certainly own an NFL franchise. You're from Western North Carolina. You went to school at USC, among other places. And you have interests in cancer research, and you have interest in venture capital, and it seems like you've been a very successful man. So I want to start with one of the things that are most important to the dialogue, certainly as we sit here on a community college in North Carolina, Isothermal Community College. There is a big dialogue going around education in this country, but most certainly in North and South Carolina. What do we need to get right about education? If you can take politics out of it, what would be important to remember and do?
Well, I think the most important thing is anytime you have an industry, and let's say education is an industry, in which there's limited competition, you have inefficiencies, and you have a lack of productivity typically. Now, with our higher education, we have competition. People can feel free to come and go. With our public school system, I'm afraid that the teachers union has too much influence over what's happening at the national scene. Now, if you talk to many teachers, they'll tell you they belong to the Teachers Association, but they're not a member of the union. They don't realize that they are a member of the union, and the union resists many of these changes. And typically, unions' number one job they view is to protect jobs. So if you have someone who's not productive, the union is there to prevent you from replacing that person. And I think accountability is important in anything that we do. And so I think that having charter schools as competition, especially in the inner cities where the schools are not productive at all, and charter schools like KIPP Academy, they are very productive, and it's the low-income student who's getting the benefit of this. So I think there's a lot that we can learn from what they're doing, and we have a lot of dedicated public school teachers. I'm not putting them down, but it's difficult for them sometimes to make the changes that they would like to make because of too much bureaucracy.
So is it about money in the system, or is it about changing the operational viability of education?
No, I think Baltimore is a wonderful example. They're spending, I think, $14,000 a year per student, and they have one of the worst records of any school system in the country. So it's not a matter of money. It's a matter of operating efficiently and having accountability. And I know there's a lot of debate over a lot of the testing, and I can't tell you which are the good tests and which are the bad tests, but I think that testing is important, you know, and we need to be able to have students that can accomplish mastering a certain level of information, and that's the way you determine that. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. So if teachers become free agents and wouldn't join a union, if that could be fixed, is there a legacy political issue and turfism about education? I mean, how do educators kind of break free of the old model so that they can realize what you described?
Well, it's difficult, and also, you know, we've had a real problem with so many lawsuits that, you know, teachers are, in many cases, in certain school districts, they're afraid to discipline the students because the kids will tell you, you know, you do that to me, and, you know, my mother and my father, they're going to sue you. And they threaten them, and frankly, they intimidate some of the teachers. And I feel sorry for the teachers. I don't know how they could conduct a classroom when you can't control what's taking place in that classroom and maintain some level of discipline. But you have that. So I think that's one of the things we ought to protect the teachers from lawsuits, unless there's something that's really grievous and you know, where they truly abuse somebody, maybe physically or whatever. But I think we need to eliminate that threat and protect our teachers.
Is there a way? Is that about parents not being involved, and the teacher feels like they've got to go the 11th yard to get something done? Should there be more parent involvement, and how do you do that?
Well, that's the tough one. I think in every case where you have a successful school, you've got involvement on the part of the parents, because that represents a commitment. KIPP Academy, as an example, the parents have to sign a pledge, you know, that they're going to see that the child does their work, they're going to see that they get to the school, you know, they're going to be, and that they'll attend meetings when called upon. And if they won't sign that pledge, their child can't go. So it requires a commitment on the part of the parent. You've got a lot of single parent homes now, and you might have a mother that's got several children. She might be working 2 jobs.
Right.
And so it's difficult for her to participate and to keep up with the children. So, you know, all of a sudden the teacher has the job of not only being a teacher, but being a parent. And they don't have the authority to discipline the child, yet they have that responsibility.
So how do you get? That's a good point, Bob. So then, how do you get the socioeconomic demographic, if you will, of a single parent, mother or father, mostly mother, that has one or multiple children that doesn't have the time to show up for a PTA meeting or even email a teacher? Is there something to do? Is there some resource that they can do that will help that demographic?
Well, it's a very difficult problem, and a lot of it is a cultural problem, and it involves much more than the school. But I think that somehow or another, you know, teachers have to be accountable, principals have to be accountable, students have to be accountable, and parents have to be accountable. And if we don't have accountability in the system, then failure or lack of preparation, all of those things are acceptable.
Let's move up the continuum on education. Let's go to higher ed. K through 12 is certainly one thing, but community colleges, four-year colleges. In North Carolina, there has been a big debate with the GOP firmly in control for several years now about cutting funding from the UNC system. South Carolina's public universities have fared better, but still not as well maybe as other areas of the country. What do we need to fix about the higher ed piece, and specifically when it comes to the unsustainable cost of education?
Well, I think what has happened at many of these institutions, the faculty runs the institution, yet the administration is responsible for funding it. And so you have a situation in which many of the college professors, they might teach one course a week. Well, if you're only going to teach one course, it takes a lot more professors. So I just think federal funds help students, but in a way, the federal funding has helped create this problem, because by making money available for the student, they then can pay the higher tuition. If they didn't have that money, the school would have to figure out some way, to stay in business, but at a lower cost for tuition. But now, and the regrettable part is students might graduate and they might owe $50,000. And that's a big burden on them once they've gotten out, and then a lot of them can't get a job today, and they still have that debt. So I think that the colleges need to be more efficient, and I think somehow or another we need to look at the federal funding and see if there's some way that it might be redirected so that it's not part of the problem.
Do you and your wife Janice have not been shy about funding schools? Rice University, certainly Baylor, USC, Columbia College in Columbia, South Carolina. And so do you feel like with your investment in those schools, Bob, and other businesses that are like-minded, do you feel like business has some leverage to change the calculus at a university, at a community college in some way?
I think by actively supporting and having programs that are clearly defined and are financed based on that definition.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Programs or disciplines of study?
Well, just as an example, we are creating free enterprise centers at a number of schools right now. I believe the free enterprise system is the most productive economic system that we have, free markets. And I think that the best helping hand that we can offer to someone is a job. That's more important than giving them charity. Give them a job. And so the question is, how do you create jobs? You create jobs through a growing economy. If the economy is stagnant, you just aren't creating jobs. If the economy is growing, you are creating jobs. So the question then is, how do you get the best growth? Our national economy is growing at a rate of about 2% right now, and that's too low. We ought to be up over 3%. If we were, we would have plenty of jobs to go around. So what we're trying to do is trying to educate students as to what the free enterprise system is all about and free markets, so that they can be an active participant and benefit from this form of economy, understanding how it works and understanding how you're rewarded for what you contribute. But we define that program with the institution, and when we fund it, it's subject to certain criteria being met. And if they aren't going to continue the support of the free enterprise system, then the money goes away. So it keeps everybody's attention.
Yes, yeah, that's probably a nice way to say that. Just a couple weeks on our program, a contemporary of yours, Bob, as well as one of the Carolina's leading stateswomen, Minor Shaw from Greenville, South Carolina, said on our program, and I'm going to read this because I want to get it right. She said, "You can't have any kind of economic development without an educated populace." Economic development in the Carolinas has been pretty incredible these last couple decades. South Carolina's at the top of their game. North Carolina's been losing some business to South Carolina. So I want to ask you, in reference to Miner's quote about the education of a population, if we get this right in the Carolinas, and if we do some of the things that you talked about, could an educated populace and education take the place of states having to play the economic incentive game of having to write bigger and bigger checks to get bigger and bigger businesses to come?
Well, I think one of the real attractions for any business is a good workforce. So to the extent that you can prepare the students to be a contributor in the workforce, that is an attraction, and many of our community colleges are doing that. And I think that we need to place an emphasis on developing these skills, you know, that might be information technology, it might be welding, and, you know, it might be plumbing. But we need these skilled workmen because they will be the middle class, and there is an opportunity for them. And there's nothing wrong with going to a vocational school or a school that has vocational studies. And I think that we might have put too much emphasis on the fact, you know, we want everybody to have, quote, a college education.
Right.
Well, there are some who don't have the passion for it, don't have the motivation, and are not able to use those skills in the workforce the way they could if they had some vocational skills that the economy needs. But certainly with these larger businesses coming in, they're looking for that workforce. And I'm not sure what's available in North Carolina. South Carolina, they have a number of programs and make commitments to the business that if you come in, we'll train X number of hundreds or thousands of workers, you know, that will have these certain skills. And that is the big attraction.
Can we talk about some football?
Sure.
Yeah. A couple of favorite sons from the Carolinas, yourself and Jerry Richardson, owner of the Carolina Panthers, I know are good friends, and also have some, I would say, in my humble opinion, a very decent track record in developing franchises. You were able to bring the NFL back to Houston. I mean, that was a big win for that part of Texas and certainly that city. And Jerry Richardson was able to bring the NFL to the Carolinas. Let's talk about Deflategate and Tom Brady. Let's talk about head injuries. Let's talk about domestic violence within the NFL.
Sure.
Do these things, Bob, do they mortally wound the brand of the NFL, or do they change the arc of how the NFL will be perceived as one of America's favorite sports? Well,
it does impact on our brand. There's no question about that. And there's no question but what our brand is extremely important to us. But I think that, you know, the more successful you are, the more desirable it is to find a flaw. You know, as they say, the higher the monkey climbs the tree, the more of his rear end he exposes. And I think that's true with the NFL, you know. I mean, we've been so dominant that there's some people who I won't necessarily say are jealous, but envious in some way. And maybe at times we've been arrogant, and people resent that because of the strength of the NFL. But I think in terms of Deflategate, it's a matter of abiding by the rules. And it's very important to us that everyone have a level playing field. And so we look at anything that would alter the competition. That's why performance-enhancing drugs, you know, have been outlawed by the NFL. And I think that that was viewed as giving someone a competitive advantage. In the case of the footballs, if they are inflated at outside the limits, and it's because someone favors it that way, they're getting a competitive advantage. So it sounds like a very minor thing, but as a general rule, there are a lot of things that fall into the basket of what's a competitive advantage. And the main thing we want to do is make sure that we eliminate any competitive advantage to the extent that we can.
So without giving up proprietary dialogues or confidences, what do the owners of the NFL talk about, especially in light of what happened in New England with Deflategate, but some of the other things I mentioned too?
Well, we talk about competition. We're talking about right now whether we'll do something with the extra point. The kickers have become so good that they 98% of the time, I think, or 99%, the extra point is made, so it's almost automatic. So we're looking now, we've got a meeting next week in San Francisco, and we'll be discussing this, and that is, should we move the ball back from the 2-yard line to the 15 if you're going to kick it? And likewise, if you don't want to kick it, maybe we should move it from the 2-yard line to the 1-yard line if you decide you're not going to kick it. So you add some excitement, a little more excitement to an extra point. So that's just one thing, but we're constantly looking at the rules and trying to determine, what rules impact the game in a negative way, and what do we need to do to improve any of the conditions in which we play. On concussions, as an example, back when I was a youngster, we were taught to keep your head up when you tackle. Over time, as the helmets got better and better and bigger and stronger, they became a weapon, and players started using their head as a weapon, and so when they would tackle, they would drive their head into the opponent's body. Well, that causes a lot of injuries, and so we now have a program called Heads Up, which teaching young people all over the country, the proper way to tackle so that you don't suffer these injuries. But the NFL is doing more in terms of concussion research than anyone. And we've teamed up with GE, and we've got a number of research programs going. And this is something that you would think in the military that they would have had all kinds of research on this, because you have a lot of concussions in the military. But we're going to be working with the military, and we'll be working with a number of hospitals, and people don't realize it, but bicycling, you have more head injuries than in football. So when mothers say, I'm not going to let my child play football, I guess they're taking their bicycle away too. I mean, there is risk involved in just about anything. Girls soccer, there are more concussions than in football. So, but we're addressing it, and we want to minimize it. And as we go forward, I think we will. We're already seeing the number of injuries dropping.
I don't know if I want to get in the middle of the debate with mothers and their children, so let me know how that one pans out. Halfway kidding. We've got a couple minutes left. Both you and your wife, Janice, have gone through challenges with cancer, successfully, I might add. How did it change you? How did it change the way, certainly you deploy your assets as a businessman, but did it change something inside of you both? Do you look at things differently?
Well, we appreciate good medical care, and we appreciate medical science because we're beneficiaries of it. But I think the main thing we've done is gone public with the fact that, we had cancer, to let people know that if you deal with it early on, you can be a winner. And if you wait and try to avoid treatment, if you let it progress too far, even the best treatments that we have can't deal with it. So that's been the message that we've been delivering. It's not the end of the world, and you can deal with it, and there are new developments occurring every day. Immunotherapy, as an example, is a case of letting your own immune system overcome the cancer. and you have to prep it in order to do that, though. So that's on the leading edge. I'm participating in a research program on that right now, and we're all very much encouraged by it. And if successful, you won't be dealing with chemotherapy and with radiation to treat cancer if we continue with the great success that we have with this.
And this is called immunotherapy?
Yes.
Okay, you know, we're out of time. I wish we had more. Would you, and I know there are a lot of demands on your time, but I hope on your swing back through North Carolina, you'll sit down and talk to us again about this, about Cogen, about Enron, about growing in the energy business. Thank you for being here. We so appreciate it.
Thank you. I enjoyed visiting with you.
Thank you. And I'd like to say finally, our senior producer, Donna Chavis, said something about former Lieutenant Governor Walter Dalton, used the term that he is warm and casual without diminishing his intelligence or his elegance. And I think that's a great way to talk about a former legislator, and certainly the Lieutenant Governor, and now the President of Isothermal Community College. So it seems a little patronizing, but Walter, who's out here, thank you. Thank you, Walter. Thank you, Lucille, for even being a better supporter than maybe your husband. Until next week, I'm Chris William. Hope your weekend is good. Good night.